Hello and welcome to this free immigration help channel. On this channel I answer immigration related questions, show you how to fill out certain immigration related applications. Just like in this video, we're going to talk about the form I-131, which is the application for travel document. Now I know that a lot of you guys who are subscribed to this channel are in the process of your asylum. So this is something that definitely applies to you. If you are ever planning to travel while you're waiting for your asylum, while you have your asylum pending, or while you are if you already got your asylum but did not receive your permanent residence card, or if you do have your permanent residence card and do not have a valid passport, because you know in a lot of situations whenever you're applying for asylum, you're coming here, you're applying for asylum, and then obviously you are never going back to where you came from, because this is a country where you left in the fear of persecution. And obviously, you know, people like that, they do not have the opportunity to go to an embassy, for example, here of that country and renew their passport because they ran away from that country. So for you guys, this is definitely applicable. If you ever want to travel, you have to apply for I-131 travel document. So let's start actually getting into it. Now, as usual, we are looking at our uscis.gov, which is the official U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services website. Do not go anywhere else, and because there's a lot of third-party websites out there that claim to do something. Some of them are scam, some of them are not really scam, they do things for you. It's kind of like a legal service, but at the end of the day, I personally feel that it is not fair because they mask themselves as something official when they're not official. They're just a third party. So this is the official, this is the main source. Always everything updated, all the applications will be found here. And also, you know, I'm doing this video in November 2019. You know, if you're watching this video later, make sure to double check, because forms, instructions, they are consistently updated by USCIS. So make sure your form is updated. Okay, so in order to get to our application, we need to go to forms. As usual, this is where all the forms are, and we are looking for the form number I-131. And if you scroll down, you will find it right here, I-131 application for travel document. Now it says travel document because there are actually a few different types which we are going to talk about. For example, if you are a refugee or an asylee and you're planning to travel, for you it is going to be a refugee travel document. Now there's also a reentry permit, and there's also an advanced parole travel document, and we're going to talk about these a little bit later. So before we get into the application, before we get into the form, as always, all of the applications I always recommend make sure to read through instructions, and this is the instructions file right here. It's a PDF. Make sure to read through it, and it will answer all your questions. For example, reentry permit. So when do we need it? A reentry permit allows a lawful permanent resident or conditional permanent resident to apply for admission to the United States upon returning from abroad during the permit's validity without the need to obtain a returning resident visa from U.S. Embassy. So it really is what it is. Reentry permit. Refugee travel document. A refugee travel document is issued to an individual in valid refugee or asylee status, or to a lawful permanent resident who obtained such status as refugee or asylee. So even if you already have your green card based on your asylum or a refugee case, this still applies to you. Individuals who hold asylee or refugee status are not lawful permanent residents, must have a refugee travel document to return to the United States after travel abroad, unless they possess an advanced parole document. A Department of Homeland Security officer at the U.S. Port of Entry will determine your admissibility when you present your travel document. So what that means is that This travel document does not guarantee you the re-entry into the United States. Now, whenever you are in the process of getting your asylum, getting your refugee, whatever, you know, your case, while it's still in process, I personally, now this is not a legal advice or anything like that, this is just from experience, seeing other people struggle with certain things. I personally do not recommend you to leave United States of America at all. Doesn't matter where. Do not travel outside of United States of America unless it's absolutely necessary. And even if it is absolutely necessary, under no circumstances you can return back to the country that you're claiming your asylum or refugee from. And I hope that makes sense. Obviously, you know, people who are escaping the country wouldn't want to return back there. But, you know, I've seen people do that. Their circumstances change. One case, I will give you an example. There was one case where a husband and wife, they were claiming asylum status, and they got their asylum status based on religious persecution from the wife's side, right? The wife's side relatives. Basically, their side was one religion, and then the guy, he was another religion. So they did not like him. They were persecuting him, and they couldn't figure it out over there, and they left the country, and they came here, and they were living happy. But they got their asylum, and then circumstances changed. Now, whenever I say changed, the threat really disappeared. The father of that lady passed away. So now, obviously, there is no threat because he was the one who had that animosity towards the guy. So they got the refugee travel documents, and they went back there to visit their relatives, to visit here and there, you know, obviously the peaceful relatives, not the wife's side relatives. But whenever they came back, they got into a lot of trouble, almost to the point where they almost got deported from the point of entry, from the airport. So make sure that does not happen to you. It's understandable that circumstances can change, but you don't want to be in the same situation as, you know, the people that I gave you an example of. So make sure you don't make the same mistake. Okay, and then another type is the advanced parole document for individuals who are currently in the United States. Parole allows an alien to physically enter the United States for a specific purpose. An individual who has been paroled has not been admitted to the United States and remains an applicant for admission even while paroled. Again, none of that guarantees your re-entry. And we have some visa types that need that parole. The H1, temporary worker, L1, and these are the if you're currently in one of the following non-immigrant classifications and remain eligible for and would be admissible in one of the following categories upon applying for admission at a port of entry. So if you are, you know, in one of those categories, and usually these are, for example, this is a temporary worker, right? Intra-company transferee, so again, it's work-related. And then there is spouse, child, V1, spouse, V2, V3, dependent children. So different categories. And then the last one is the advanced parole document for individuals who are already outside of the United States and they're planning to enter, and they are applying it from the outside of the United States. So reentry permit. If you are in the United States as a lawful permanent resident or conditional permanent resident, you may apply for reentry permit. All right, you must be physically present in the United States when you file the reentry permit application and complete the biometric service requirements. So as with a lot of cases, with a lot of applications with USCIS, you do need to go and do the biometrics procedure, which is the fingerprint, taking picture. A reentry permit may be sent to a U.S. embassy, U.S. consul, or DHS office abroad for you to pick up if you make such a request when you file your application. Now that is applicable whenever you are really in a rush somewhere and it's an emergency. You can request if you don't have time to wait. Now usually from the personal experience, this process takes about between 1 and 2 months for you to get that reentry permit. So if you don't have time to wait for 1 or 2 months, you can have it sent directly to the embassy in the country where you're going to. Honestly, I would not recommend doing that. I would recommend waiting to get it here and then traveling. But just in case, keep that in mind, you can do it. Now, the validity of the reentry permit, another very important point to make. Reentry permit issued to a lawful permanent resident, and it's valid for 2 years from the date of issuance. Keep that in mind. Now, however, if you have been outside of the United States for more than 4 of the last 5 years since becoming a lawful permanent resident, the permit will be limited to 1 year, except that a permit with a validity of 2 years may be issued to the following: a lawful permanent resident whose travel is on the order of the U.S. government, and a lawful permanent resident employed by a public international organization, and then also a lawful permanent resident who is a professional athlete. Also, again, you know, a word of warning: even if you are a lawful permanent resident, and you should know that there are certain limitations. You can't leave the country for longer than 6 months. You can, but it's not recommended, because your goal as a lawful permanent resident is to show immigration services that you really are the resident. This country is your place of residence. And obviously, if you're leaving too often, if you're leaving for longer than 6 months, if you are, you know, doing all of these things, obviously that residence, that place of residence becomes questionable. And you don't want extra questions, because these questions, if you are a lawful permanent resident, you know, one day you will have to apply for a naturalization, and these questions will come up during your naturalization interview. Definitely will come up. All right, so there are certain situations where a reentry permit cannot be issued to you if you have already been issued such a document. Obviously, a notice was published in the Federal Register that precludes the issuance of such documents, and sometimes that happens, but you know, just something to keep in mind. Notice to lawful permanent resident, permanent or conditional permanent residents concerning possible abandonment of status. That's what I was talking about. If you do not obtain a reentry permit, lengthy or frequent absences from the United States could be factors supporting a conclusion that you have abandoned your lawful permanent resident status. Very important. Keep that in mind. Okay, refugee travel document. If you are in the United States, but there's also an option where you can do it if you are outside of the United States. So, if you are in the United States, invalid refugee or asylee status, or if you are a lawful permanent resident as a direct result of your refugee or asylee status in the United States, you may apply for refugee travel document. You should apply for refugee travel document before you leave the United States. If biometric services are requested and you fail to appear to have a biometrics collected, the application may be denied. All right, if you are outside of the United States already, have valid refugee or asylee status, or you're a lawful permanent resident, as a direct result of that, you may be permitted to file Form I-131 and apply for a refugee travel document. The USCIS Overseas District Director with jurisdiction over your location makes this decision in his or her discretion. Your application must be filed within 1 year of your last departure from the United States and should include an explain of why you failed to apply while you were in there. Okay, travel warning regarding voluntary re-availment. Warning to asylees who travel to the country of claimed persecution. Kind of mentioned that already. If you applied for asylum on or after April 1st, 1997, your asylum status may be terminated if the U.S. government determines that you have voluntarily availed yourself of the protection of your country of nationality, or if stateless country of less habitual residence. So keep that in mind. It is very important. So a lot of things. We're not gonna go through all of them. Just gonna mention a few more things briefly. So general requirements. What do we need as initial evidence? All applications must include a copy of an official photo identity document showing your photo, name, and date of birth. such as, you know, employment authorization document or driver's license. Form I-94 arrival departure record is not acceptable as photo identification document. Keep that in mind. They put it there because people do send it as identification, and I personally seen people do that. Don't do that. It's not valid. If you're applying for reentry permit, you must attach a copy of the front and back of your form I-551. If you have not yet received form I-551, a copy of biographic page of your passport and a copy of the visa page showing your initial admission. Okay, so refugee travel document, which is more common one, right? You must attach a copy of the document issued to you by USCIS showing your refugee or asylee status and the expiration date of such status. Now, it's either going to be a letter directly from USCIS saying that your asylee or refugee status has been granted, but sometimes if USCIS denied your asylum claim and you had to file to immigration court, sometimes you have a court document that says that your asylum has been granted. So different cases, different situations. Okay, you can find everything that's needed here for the advanced parole as well. Now there are photographs that you need to attach, and obviously biometrics service requirement. You know, whenever they call you for biometrics, you have to go, and there's a $85 biometric fee on top of the application fee for the travel document, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. Now, keep in mind there are expedite request instructions. Like I said, if you're in emergency, there's a way to expedite it. Keep that in mind. Now, currently, the filing fee, we got to that, is $575. That's for re-entry permit. And then there is a biometric service fee of $85, which is separate. Now, I know these fees are separate, and I do get a question very often: should I combine one check or one money order for this and one together, so 575 plus 85, or should I do it separately? You can do it together, but I personally do recommend it. Not a legal advice again, but I personally do recommend you to do it separately. So one check is 575 and one check $85, saying in the check, you know, re-entry permit application 575, and then in another check, re-entry permit application biometrics fee $85. Yeah, and then obviously you can find the rest of everything here. Now let's see. I believe the travel document, the refugee travel document, is actually cheaper. It is only $135, and you will notice if you are applying for asylum, if you're applying for refugee, a lot of application fees are waived. A lot of application fees are much cheaper, and thanks to USCIS, they kind of made it easier, made it cheaper, because they know that whenever you are going through that process, it can be a pretty tough time. Okay, so obviously do not mail cash in capital, because people do that. Don't do that. Make sure it's a check. And the check should be made payable to U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Do not abbreviate it. You have to write out U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Now, where to file, we're gonna talk a little bit later. And obviously, if you do have any kind of address change, I made the video on address change and how the process works, so you can check it out. And you know, if you move while this application is pending, make sure to go to uscis.gov website and update your address so that you can get your actual travel document to the new address. Okay, so now, you know, the processing, they talk about the initial processing of how long it takes. Again, from personal experience, it takes about between a month and 2 months, unless you're doing the expedited. Okay, so let's actually take a look at where to file your application, completed application, and then we're gonna go into the actual application, see how it looks and how to fill it out. So, filing addresses for Form I-131, and you will notice that there are a lot of different options. In this case, you know, whichever category applies to you, pick that one. But in this case, let's do a refugee travel document for asylees, right? So let's see. Application for pending, nope, Haitian, Cuban, relatives of Filipino, humanitarian, international, TNU, temporary protected status, U.S. military, correcting a U.S. says error, all other applicants, including reentry permit applicants. All right, this looks like our category. So, depending on which state you're in is going to be the service center that you're going to mail your application to. And currently there is no online way to file the application, so you have to actually do the physical application. But again, USCIS, they are working on bringing new features to the website, so you might see an online feature. If there is, it's going to be much easier to do. So let's say you live in Georgia. Let's see, Georgia is not here. Georgia. All right, so Georgia, so that would be USCIS Dallas Lockbox, and for US Postal Service is going to be the PO Box, and for FedEx, UPS, and DHL is going to be this directly going there. I always recommend just doing the regular USPS service, which is US Postal Service, and just sending it to the PO Box. I have a few cases that I've seen where FedEx, UPS, DHL, because there wasn't anyone to either sign or something, it got lost. Just do it to a PO Box. Just can't go wrong with that. Okay, so we're done with where to file. Now you know where to find it. If you want to see the updated filing fees, you can find them here as well. Let's actually take a look at the application itself, Form I-131, and see how to fill it out. Now, it should be pretty straightforward. You can download PDF right there, and as you can see, this form is actually electronically fillable, most of it. So if you see this first part right here, you're not going to touch it. It's specifically for the immigration officer reviewing your application. But on computer here, you can actually do your, now this is a family name, so it's going to be Doe. You can actually fill out, and I highly recommend you to fill all of that stuff up on the computer. You can print it out and fill it up in black ink, but you're risking a chance, you know, to make it not clear for the immigration officer, because we all have different handwritings. My handwriting is horrible, so fill it out here. Also, keep in mind, whenever you're filling out, don't leave blank blank squares, right? Blank areas. For example, if you don't have middle name, make sure to put an A for not applicable. Don't leave it blank, because USCIS, whenever they're reviewing applications, they do not like these blank spaces, and you're risking for them to return this application packet to you and say, you know, fix this, fix that, make sure there are no blank spaces. And while you're doing that, of course, it's no big deal. It's not like they're gonna deny it because of that, but you're risking, you know, making the application process longer for yourself. So make sure no blank spaces. So obviously information about yourself, your physical address, there is your immigration information, your alien registration number if you have one, which you probably do, country of birth, country of citizenship, class of admission, meaning that, you know, what are you, what's the visa status, how are you in the country, gender, date of birth, and US Social Security number if you have one. Alright, now the application type this is the important part. This is where you will specify what kind of document, what kind of travel document you need. And in our example, we're going to do the refugee travel document, right? So it is going to be, let's see, I'm a permanent resident or conditional resident. No, I now hold a US refugee or asylee status, and I'm applying for refugee travel document. That's it. This is the one. Also, you can select I am a permanent resident as a direct result of a refugee or asylee status if you do have your green card already. I'm applying for an advanced parole to allow me to return to the United States after temporary foreign travel. I'm outside the United States and I'm applying for an advanced parole document. I'm applying for an advanced parole document for a person who is outside the United States. So you can apply on behalf of somebody. Okay. If you check the box IF, provide the following information about the person in 2A through 2P. Now, you only need to fill that up if you selected this. but you cannot fill it out electronically, so you'll have to print it out and fill it out yourself. Whenever you do print it out, make sure to put not applicable in these fields. Don't leave them blank. Now, processing information. Date of intended departure. This is where you are talking about your travel, when you are leaving, how long you will be gone. Are you or any person included in this application now in exclusion, deportation, removal, or restriction proceedings? Hopefully not. Have you ever been issued a reentry permit? And then the processing information. Where is it going to be sent, the travel document? Where do you want the travel document to be sent? Now, to the US address, to your physical address that you showed in the beginning of the application, or if you are planning to not wait for that travel document to arrive, you can select to US embassy or consulate, or wherever you want it to be sent. Now, this is more information about your proposed travel, purpose of the trip, list the countries you intend to visit. So USCIS, they want to know where you're going and why you're going there. Okay, complete only if you are applying for reentry permit. This is some information there if you are applying for reentry permit. Now, complete only if you're applying for refugee travel document. This is applicable to us, to our example. So, country from which you are refugee or asylee. This is the country that you are claiming your refugee asylee status from. So, let's say, for example, let's say Kyrgyzstan. I hope I spelled it correctly. Do you plan to travel to the country named above? No. Hopefully not. You shouldn't. Return to the country named above, since you were granted your refugee. No. Applied for and obtained a national passport renewal or entry permit for that country. No, and you shouldn't. Even if you are able to do that, you shouldn't be doing that. Applied for and or received any benefit from such country. Obviously, we don't want to do that either. So you will have to answer all these questions. And then complete only if you're applying for advanced parole. Now, the last page is the signature of the applicant, obviously, which you will need to print out the whole application and then sign it. Don't forget to sign it. You can put your date of signature here and then daytime phone with the, printed on the computer. And then if somebody filled out the application for you, they will have to put their information here. So as you can see, the application itself, I-131, is pretty straightforward. It's nothing complicated. As long as you do read through the instructions, you will do just fine. As long as you get everything, all your information directly from uscis.gov. I'll put the link for that website in the description below. If you do have any requests for any more applications on how to apply for certain things, or questions related to immigration topics in general, I will be happy to see them in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.